The sound of laughter and silverware clinking filled Martha's old farmhouse as snow fell softly outside the frosted windows. It was Christmas Eve, her favorite night of the year. The dining table glowed under warm candlelight, decorated with pine cones, red ribbons, and her grandmother's china set. For the first time in years, all her family was together. Her son Daniel, his wife Emily, and their 2 little boys. Martha's wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she poured wine into Emily's glass. "To family?" she said with a shaky smile. Everyone raised their glasses, except Emily, who only offered a polite nod. Martha pretended not to notice. She had learned over the years that ignoring Emily's coldness was easier than confronting it. Still, tonight felt different. Martha had prepared everything perfectly. Emily's favorite cranberry sauce, Daniel's roast beef, even a small gift for everyone, wrapped in golden paper beneath the glowing tree. It was her way of reminding them that Christmas wasn't about the past or resentment. It was about forgiveness. After dinner, Martha clapped her hands lightly. "All right, time for presents," she announced. The children squealed, running to the tree. Laughter filled the room again. Martha smiled, her heart full. Maybe, just maybe, tonight could heal old wounds. When it was Emily's turn, Martha picked up a small red box and handed it to her. "This one's for you, dear," she said softly. "Something special." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You didn't have to get me anything," she replied, her tone distant but polite. She peeled the ribbon slowly, then lifted the lid. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Emily's eyes froze on what lay inside, a delicate gold necklace, its pendant shaped like a teardrop. The color drained from her face. Her hands began to shake. "Where did you get this?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Martha blinked, confused. It belonged to your mother. I thought you should have it." Emily shot to her feet, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "How dare you!" she shouted, tears already forming in her eyes. "You had no right." Daniel rose from his seat. "Emily, what's wrong?" But she didn't answer. Emily threw the box down, the necklace spilling onto the white tablecloth like a drop of gold blood. Then, without another word, she stormed out of the dining room, slamming the door so hard the ornaments trembled. The children stared. Daniel's face was pale. And Martha sat frozen, clutching her wine glass as the warm glow of Christmas faded into silence. The house felt hollow after Emily's footsteps disappeared down the hall. Only the faint ticking of the clock filled the silence. The scent of roasted beef and cinnamon candles suddenly turned bitter in Martha's throat. She stared at the empty chair where her daughter-in-law had been sitting, the red napkin still perfectly folded, untouched. Daniel broke the silence first. "Mom, what did you give her?" His voice was low, confused, almost afraid. Martha's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked down at the necklace lying on the table, gleaming faintly under the light. "It was her mother's," she whispered. "I thought it might bring her comfort." Daniel frowned. "Her mother's? How did you even—" He stopped mid-sentence, shaking his head as if the thought itself was too strange to finish. "Mom, Emily barely talks about her past. You should have known better than to—" "I didn't mean any harm," Martha interrupted, her voice cracking. "Her mother and I were friends. I just wanted—" She trailed off. "Wanted what? Forgiveness? A connection? Maybe to remind Emily that family isn't only bound by blood, but by kindness." But looking at Daniel's hardened expression, she realized those words wouldn't help now. The children shifted nervously, sensing the tension. "Can we open the rest of the presents, Grandma?" the younger one asked. His innocent eyes searched her face, unaware of the storm brewing between the adults. Martha forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart." But her voice trembled. She reached to pick up the fallen necklace, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. For a split second, she felt something. A chill, a memory flickering like a ghost. The day she'd received that necklace from a woman in tears, begging her to keep it safe until the time is right. Now that time had come, and everything was falling apart. Daniel sighed heavily and left the room to find his wife. The boys returned to their toys, and Martha sat alone at the table staring at the necklace, wondering how something so small could carry such pain. Outside, snow fell thicker, covering the world in white silence. The Christmas lights blinked gently, their reflections glimmering in her wine glass like tiny memories refusing to fade. For years, Martha had buried the past, convinced it was better that way. But tonight, when Emily screamed at the sight of that necklace, Martha understood. The past never truly stays buried. She leaned back in her chair, the echo of Emily's words ringing in her ears. You had no right. No right to what? To remember? To love? To keep a promise that wasn't hers to keep? Martha didn't know, but she could feel it deep inside. This Christmas was only the beginning. The kitchen was dark except for the dim orange light above the stove. Martha sat alone at the table, hands clasped around a cup of cocoa gone cold. The echo of Emily's scream still haunted her ears. Every ornament, every blinking light seemed to mock her, as if Christmas itself had turned against her. She closed her eyes and the years peeled away like layers of dust. She could still remember the first time she met Emily. It was a spring afternoon, 8 years ago. Daniel had brought her home after college, a tall, striking young woman with perfect hair, sharp eyes, and a smile that didn't quite reach her heart. Back then, Martha had been so eager to meet the woman who had stolen her sons. She'd baked her famous lemon pie and cleaned every corner of the house, wanting to make a good impression. But the moment Emily stepped inside, Martha had sensed something. A chill in the way she looked around, as if judging everything from the floral curtains to the chipped teapot. Your home is quaint, Emily had said, forcing a smile. Daniel had laughed, oblivious. But Martha felt the sting. She'd spent decades making this house a home, and now it felt small under Emily's gaze. Still, Martha tried. She offered advice, cooked meals, even gifted the young couple some savings for their first apartment. Yet somehow, every gesture turned into an offense. When Martha suggested a church wedding, Emily wanted a beach one. When Martha knitted a blanket for their baby, Emily said it didn't fit the nursery's color palette. Daniel always smoothed things over, but the gap between the two women widened with every passing year. Martha could never understand why Emily's hostility ran so deep. She'd never done anything but try to love her. Until one evening, 5 years ago, when Martha found an old photograph buried in her keepsake box, a picture of her and a woman with the same golden eyes as Emily. Her breath caught. Clara. Clara, her dearest friend from decades ago. The one who had disappeared without a word after falling in love with a married man. The one who had handed Martha a small velvet box and whispered, "If anything happens to me, give this to my daughter when she's ready." Martha had kept that promise buried under silence and time, thinking she'd never cross paths with Clara's child. But now she realized the truth. Emily was Clara's daughter. The same eyes, the same way she guarded her emotions. Martha took a trembling sip of cocoa, her heart tightening. Maybe fate hadn't brought Emily into her life by accident. Maybe this was unfinished business, one that had waited years for a Christmas night to explode. The cold light from the window flickered across her face as a single thought struck her. Quiet but sharp as glass. What if giving that necklace wasn't an act of kindness, but the reopening of a wound I never knew existed? Martha's fingers traced the edge of the teacup as her mind drifted further back, to a time when her hair was still auburn and her laughter came easily. The year was 1982. She was 25, newly married, and living next door to Clara Whitmore, the woman who would become her closest friend. Clara was everything Martha wasn't. Bold, glamorous, and fearless. Where Martha baked pies and planted tulips, Clara painted, danced barefoot in the garden, and smoked her husband's cigars just to make him furious. But beneath that wild spirit was a sadness Martha only began to notice after years of friendship. They'd sit on Clara's porch at twilight, sipping lemonade, talking about dreams and disappointments. Clara used to smile when she spoke about her baby girl, Emily, just a toddler back then, and her husband, Richard, but the smile never lasted long. One evening, Martha had asked gently, "Are you happy, Clara?" Clara's eyes had glistened. "Happiness is overrated, darling. I'd settle for peace." Martha didn't understand what that meant until one stormy night when Clara showed up at her door, soaked to the bone, clutching a velvet box. The same one Martha would one day give to Emily. Her mascara had run down her face, her voice trembling. "He lied to me, Martha," Clara whispered. "He said he'd leave her. He said we'd start over, but he's gone back to his wife, and now I can't stay here." Martha had tried to calm her, wrapping her in a blanket. "You'll be fine, Clara. You always are." But Clara had just shaken her head, a hollow smile forming on her lips. "No, this time it's different. I've ruined too many lives." She pressed the small box into Martha's hands. "Promise me something. If I can't give this to Emily myself, you will, one day, when she's old enough to understand." Martha opened the box, a delicate gold necklace with a teardrop pendant, simple, but heavy with meaning. "What should I tell her it means?" she asked softly. Clara's eyes were glassy as she whispered, "Tell her it's from her father." And then she was gone. The next morning, Clara's house was empty. Rumors spread that she had run away, maybe to another city, maybe to another man. No one knew for sure. Her husband sold the house a few months later, and Martha never saw her again. Years passed. Life went on. The memory of that night blurred like an old photograph until Daniel met Emily. When Martha saw the girl's golden eyes, so much like Clara's, her heart nearly stopped. Now as she sat in the silent kitchen, Martha realized the weight of that promise. She had kept it for more than 30 years, but perhaps she was never meant to fulfill it. Because if what Clara said that night was true, that necklace carried not love, but shame. And now that shame had finally found its way back to the surface, through Emily's scream. For weeks before Christmas, Martha couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that velvet box in her dresser drawer, the one she'd hidden for more than 3 decades, tucked under old scarves and faded photographs. It was as if Clara's ghost whispered to her in the dark, "It's time." But time for what? Martha didn't know. That fall, she'd found herself staring at Emily more often. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the proud tilt of her chin, the guarded way she smiled. It was like watching Clara reborn, yet colder, sharper. Every family dinner felt like walking on eggshells. Emily would complain about the food, the decor, even the Christmas playlist. Daniel, as always, tried to bridge the gap, but Martha could feel it. The contempt, the resentment burning quietly beneath the surface. Still, something inside her kept whispering, "She deserves to know." One afternoon, as the first snow began to fall, Martha opened her dresser and pulled out the box. Her hands trembled. The necklace gleamed faintly in the weak light. It hadn't lost its shine, only gained weight, the kind that comes from secrets too heavy to bear. She sat on the edge of her bed, remembering Clara's voice that night. Tell her it's from her father. But the memory had always felt wrong, too simple, too final. Martha had often wondered if Clara had told her the full truth, or if there was something darker she had left unsaid. She thought about the day Emily and Daniel got married. Martha had stood in the back pew, tears in her eyes, clutching that very box in her purse, ready to give it to Emily as a blessing. But when she saw Daniel's radiant smile, Emily's confident posture, and how she barely glanced at her new mother-in-law, Martha froze. Something told her it wasn't the right time. So she kept it. For years, through birthdays, anniversaries, and the births of her grandchildren, the box became a symbol of restraint, of loyalty, of fear. But this Christmas felt different. Martha was turning 68. She'd lost friends, her husband, even her health. She wanted peace before it was too late. The necklace, she thought, was her way of keeping her promise to Clara, and perhaps healing the rift between her and Emily. So she wrapped it carefully in red paper, tied it with gold ribbon, and placed it under the tree. She remembered whispering to herself that night before bed, "It's just a necklace. It's just the past." But as she blew out the candle, a strange unease twisted in her chest. For the first time in years, she dreamt of Clara, standing in the snow, tears on her cheeks, whispering, "You don't know what you're giving her." When Martha woke, her pillow was wet. Now, sitting alone after Emily's scream, she understood what that dream had tried to warn her. The past doesn't disappear when we bury it. It waits, patient and silent, until the moment we dare to unwrap it. The house was silent long after Emily's car disappeared down the snowy road. Daniel stood by the window watching the taillights vanish into the dark, his shoulders rigid. The boys had gone upstairs, whispering questions their father couldn't answer. Only Martha remained at the table, the untouched pie and half-empty glasses staring back at her like ghosts of the evening that was supposed to heal everything. Daniel finally turned around. "What the hell happened, Mom?" His voice was low but sharp, every word cutting through the quiet like glass. Martha swallowed hard. "I told you, it was just a gift, something from her mother." "Her mother?" Daniel snapped. "Emily's mother's been dead for decades. How could you possibly have anything that belonged to her?" Martha hesitated. "Her mother was my friend, a long time ago." Daniel's face twisted with disbelief. "And you thought this was the perfect time to bring that up? On Christmas Eve? You know how Emily feels about her family, about her past. She never talks about it for a reason." Martha's chest tightened. "I was only trying to give her something meaningful. I didn't know it would—" "You didn't know?" He laughed bitterly. "You gave her something that made her scream and run out of her own home, Mom. That's not nothing." She looked down, her fingers trembling. "You don't understand. I made a promise to her mother before she died." Daniel frowned, stepping closer. "A promise? To a woman you haven't seen in 30 years? What kind of promise could possibly cause this?" Martha couldn't look him in the eye. "To give Emily that necklace one day, that's all." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Well, whatever that necklace meant, it clearly wasn't something good." He stopped, staring at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" Her heart skipped. "Daniel, please." But he was already backing away, shaking his head. "You've been keeping secrets from me, from all of us." His voice broke. "And you just couldn't help yourself, could you? Even tonight you had to control everything." Martha rose from her chair, desperate. "I wasn't trying to control anyone. I was trying to fix something that was broken long before you were born." Daniel stared at her, stunned into silence. Outside, the wind howled against the window, snow swirling like angry ghosts. Finally, he said quietly, "Then maybe some things aren't meant to be fixed." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Martha alone once more, surrounded by flickering lights, broken glass, and the faint glimmer of a gold necklace that seemed to mock her with its silence. Daniel left in a rush, slamming the front door so hard the wreath fell off its hook. The echo lingered through the empty house, followed by the sound of the car engine starting and fading into the storm outside. Martha sat back down, her body trembling as though the walls themselves had turned cold. The silence pressed on her ears like a weight. For a long time she didn't move. She just stared at the gold necklace glimmering faintly under the candlelight, the small pendant lying there like an accusation. Her heart ached. What had she done? She gathered the plates slowly, her fingers numb. The kitchen felt unbearably still. As she stacked the dishes by the sink, something small and brittle fell from between two folded napkins. A yellowed envelope, its edges curled with age. Martha froze. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Slanted, elegant, unmistakable. Clara's. Her breath caught. She had forgotten this even existed. She must have tucked it away in an old recipe book years ago, after that terrible night when Clara had vanished. With shaking hands, she opened it. The ink had faded, but the words were still clear enough to read. Martha, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't face what I've done. I need someone to protect Emily from the truth, at least until she's strong enough to know it. That necklace is not just a gift, it's proof. If anyone ever finds out who gave it to me, everything will fall apart. Promise me you'll be careful. Martha's eyes widened. Proof? Proof of what? She read on, heart pounding. He said he loved me, said he would leave her for me. But he lied. I know now that I was the mistake that could ruin too many lives. Emily can never know who her father really is. Not if you love her the way I do. Martha's trembling hands dropped the letter to the table. Her pulse roared in her ears. Emily's father, the necklace, the secret. Suddenly, everything made sense. Emily's panic, her scream, the terror in her eyes. Somehow, she knew. Martha clutched the letter to her chest, tears burning behind her eyes. What have I done? Her promise had been meant to protect Emily, not destroy her. But by giving that necklace, she might have handed her the very key to the truth Clara had died trying to hide. Outside, the snowstorm howled louder, shaking the windows. Martha sank to her knees, her fingers clutching the edge of the table, the letter fluttering beside her like a dying bird. For the first time in years, she whispered her old friend's name, a broken prayer into the empty room. Clara. What did you keep from me? The storm outside raged through the night, but inside the house, Martha felt a colder storm building inside her chest. She sat in her armchair by the window, the letter from Clara clutched tightly in her hand. The paper was soft from age, and her tears had blurred some of the words, but one line kept echoing in her head. Emily can never know who her father really is. The words gnawed at her like teeth. Martha's thoughts drifted to her late husband, Robert, Daniel's father, a kind, disciplined man respected in their small town, but never warm. He'd worked long hours at the bank, coming home late, smelling faintly of whiskey and cologne. She used to tell herself that was the scent of hard work, not guilt. But now, she wasn't so sure. In her memory, she saw the way Robert used to linger when Clara came over, the way his laughter softened, his voice lowered. At the time, she had brushed it off as harmless flirtation, the kind men indulged in without consequence. Clara had been beautiful, magnetic, impossible to ignore. But Robert was a good man. He would never... Would he? Martha rose, pacing the living room, her hand pressed to her temple. No, she whispered to herself. No, he wouldn't. But the doubt was there now, growing roots she couldn't pull out. She walked to the old cabinet where Robert's things were stored, his watch, his medals, the keepsakes she never had the heart to throw away. She opened the drawer and found a photo album. Pages of memories stared back at her. Weddings, holidays, family picnics. Then one photo stopped her breath, taken in their backyard one summer. Robert stood by the fence, smiling, and beside him, Clara. Her hand on his arm, her smile, too intimate. Martha felt her knees weaken. She sank to the couch, the photo trembling in her hand. Could it be true? Could Emily be... Her voice cracked as the unthinkable formed in her mind. If Clara's letter meant what she thought it did, then the man Clara had loved, the man who'd given her that necklace, might have been Robert. And if that was true, then Emily and Daniel, her son and her daughter-in-law, shared more than marriage. They shared blood. Martha gasped, clutching her chest. The room spun. The Christmas lights blurred into smears of gold. She pressed the photo against her heart, choking back a sob. No. Please, God, no. Her phone buzzed suddenly, shattering the silence. It was Daniel. A single text appeared on the screen. She's not coming home tonight. Martha's tears finally spilled over. For the first time, she wished the storm outside would drown out everything. The whispers, the guilt, and the secret she had just unearthed. Because if what she feared was true, she had done something far worse than break her family's Christmas. She had destroyed it. The next morning, the snow lay thick and untouched, muffling every sound in the neighborhood. Martha stood by the window, her breath fogging the glass, watching the pale light crawl over the frozen world. The letter and photograph still sat on the table behind her, silent witnesses to a truth she could no longer ignore. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emily's face, that look of shock, of betrayal, of something deeper than anger, fear. If Emily truly believed what Martha now suspected, then she must be living in a nightmare. By the time the church bells rang 8, Martha made up her mind. She slipped on her old gray coat, grabbed her car keys, and drove through the snow-covered streets toward Daniel and Emily's house on the other side of town. The drive was tense, her fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. Every streetlight seemed to pulse with accusation. When she finally pulled into their driveway, she sat there for a long time, staring at the familiar porch light flickering in the cold wind. She almost turned back, but then she saw the curtains move, a shadow pacing back and forth, and she knew Emily was awake. Martha took a deep breath and stepped out. The snow crunched beneath her boots as she made her way to the door. Her heart pounded as she rang the bell. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door opened. Emily stood there, wrapped in a thick robe, her eyes red and swollen. She looked smaller than usual, fragile even. But her voice was sharp. "What do you want?" Martha hesitated. "To talk. Please." Emily laughed bitterly. "Talk? Now you want to talk? After humiliating me in front of everyone?" "I didn't mean to." "You gave me that necklace," Emily interrupted, her tone rising. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize it?" Martha blinked, taken aback. "Recognize it?" Emily's hands trembled as she crossed her arms. "I saw it when I was 8. My mother kept it locked away in her jewelry box. She used to cry whenever she looked at it. I asked her once who gave it to her. She told me it came from a man she should have never loved." Martha's throat went dry. "Emily, your mother was my friend. She lied to you too," Emily spat. "That necklace was the reason she left, the reason she died miserable. And you—" She pointed at Martha's chest, eyes blazing. "You just had to drag it back, didn't you? You had to remind me of the one thing I've spent my whole life trying to forget." Tears filled Martha's eyes. "I was trying to give you something that belonged to her. Something beautiful." "Beautiful," Emily's voice cracked. "It's cursed. Every time I see it, I remember the man who destroyed her." The air between them thickened, breath turning to frost. Martha whispered, almost afraid to ask, "Who was he, Emily? Who do you think gave it to her?" Emily stared at her, face pale as snow. Then she whispered the words that made Martha's blood turn to ice. "Your husband." The words hit Martha like a thunderclap. For a moment she could barely breathe. The cold wind howled through the open door, scattering snowflakes between them, but neither woman moved. "My husband?" Martha whispered. "Emily, that's impossible." Emily let out a sharp, trembling laugh. "Is it? Because everything adds up. My mother told me he was married, that he worked at a bank, that he promised to leave his wife but never did. She said his name was Robert." The name struck Martha like a knife twisting deep inside her chest. She took a step back, shaking her head. No, you must be mistaken. Clara, your mother, she was hurt, confused. She wouldn't have—" "She would," Emily cut in, her voice breaking. because he lied to her, because he made her believe she was special, and then he left her to rot. Martha's eyes filled with tears as the snow blew into the entryway, melting against her trembling hands. Emily, listen to me. Robert was a good man. He was my husband for 40 years. He would never... Emily's face hardened. Stop pretending you didn't know what kind of man he was. I didn't, Martha cried out, her voice echoing down the quiet street. If I had known... You'd have done what? Emily snapped. Thrown him out? Told the truth? No, you would have done what you always do, Martha. Keep it quiet. Hide the ugly parts and pretend everything's perfect. The accusation sliced through her. It was the same thing Daniel had said the night before. You just couldn't help yourself, could you? Martha's knees weakened. She reached for the wall to steady herself. Emily, please, you have to understand. Your mother was my friend. I loved her like a sister. Emily's eyes glistened, her jaw tight. Then why didn't you protect her? Martha froze. Emily's voice dropped to a whisper, shaking but fierce. She died because of that man, because she couldn't bear the shame. She left me with nothing but that cursed necklace and the truth that ruined her life. And now, thanks to you, that truth is back. Martha's tears spilled freely. Emily, I swear to you, I didn't know. Emily turned away, gripping the edge of the door. You should have left it buried. My mother made her choices, and so did yours. But you couldn't stop yourself, could you? You had to drag all of us into it. Emily, please. But Emily's voice cracked as she shouted, Do you even realize what this means? If what my mother told me was true, then Daniel and I... She stopped mid-sentence, her voice choking on the words. Her hands covered her mouth as if to stop them from escaping. Martha stepped forward, terrified. Then, what, Emily? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't speak. She just shook her head, then slammed the door shut between them. Martha stood outside in the snow, her breath visible in the freezing air, her heart pounding with dread. The echo of that unfinished sentence burned in her mind, cruel and relentless. If what my mother told me was true, then Daniel and I... She didn't need to hear the rest. The horror was already there, clawing its way into her chest. Martha stood frozen on the doorstep long after the door slammed shut. Snow clung to her coat, her hair, her eyelashes, melting into cold streaks down her face. The world around her seemed distant, muted, like she was standing inside a memory she couldn't escape from. She stumbled back to her car, her breath uneven, the keys slipping in her trembling hands. Her mind was a storm of voices. Emily's accusation, Clara's letter, Robert's smile from long ago. It can't be true. It can't be. She started the car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly at the falling snow. For a long time, she didn't move. But then headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Daniel's car. He parked beside her, his expression a mix of confusion and anger as he approached. "Mom?" he called out, knocking on her window. Martha rolled it down slowly, her face pale. "Daniel, you shouldn't be here." "I came to talk to Emily," he said. "She won't answer my calls. What's going on? She just texted me to stay away." Martha hesitated. Her lips trembled. "Daniel, listen to me. There's something you need to know." Before she could finish, the front door opened again. Emily stood there, her eyes red, her face streaked with tears. "Don't you dare tell him!" she shouted. Daniel turned to her. "Emily, what are you talking about?" Emily shook her head, her voice breaking. "Just go, Daniel. Please, you don't understand." Daniel looked from his wife to his mother, realization slowly dawning. Something terrible connected them both. "What are you hiding from me?" Martha stepped out of the car, her boots crunching against the snow. "Daniel, please, not here." "No," he snapped. "You both owe me the truth." Emily's breath came out in sobs. "You want the truth?" She pointed at Martha. "Ask her. Ask your perfect mother why she's been holding on to a dead woman's necklace for 30 years. Daniel's face darkened. What does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it, Emily screamed. Because that necklace proves your father had an affair with my mother. The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Daniel froze, the color draining from his face. That's insane. Martha tried to speak, but her voice broke. Daniel, please, I don't know if it's true. Emily's voice was hoarse. Oh, it's true. My mother told me herself. And now... She looked at Daniel, her face twisting in pain. Now I think you and I are... Stop! Daniel shouted, his hands shaking. Don't say it! Silence fell, thick as the snow around them. Martha looked at her son, the boy she had raised, the man she'd watched fall in love, and felt her heart shatter. She had never seen such horror in his eyes. Emily turned away, sobbing, retreating back into the house. Daniel didn't follow. He just stood there, breathing hard, before whispering, "Tell me it's not true, Mom." Martha's lips parted, but no sound came out. And in that silence, that long, suffocating silence, Daniel understood the answer. Daniel didn't say another word. He just stared at his mother, eyes wide, wounded, searching for something that wasn't there. Then he stepped back, turned, and walked into the storm. The snow swallowed the sound of his footsteps, but Martha felt every one of them like a crack splitting through her heart. "Daniel!" she cried out, her voice breaking in the cold air. "Please, wait!" But he didn't stop. His figure disappeared into the white haze, leaving her standing there, small, shivering, and utterly alone. The wind whipped against her face, stinging her skin. She pressed a hand to her chest, gasping for breath. The world spun, somewhere behind her. Emily had closed the door again, shutting Martha out completely. When she finally managed to get back home, the house felt colder than the snow outside. Every shadow seemed heavier, every silence louder. She walked into the living room, her boots leaving a trail of melting footprints. On the table lay the things that had started it all: the necklace, the letter, the photo. Martha sank to her knees beside them, shaking. "What have I done?" she whispered. She picked up Clara's letter again, rereading it by the flickering firelight. Her eyes burned as she traced the ink-stained lines. There had to be something she missed, some clue, some mercy. Her gaze landed on a faint smudge in the corner, barely visible. She squinted, tilting the paper toward the light. It wasn't a smudge. It was a second page, folded behind the first. Her fingers fumbled as she carefully unfolded it, and there it was, a few more lines hastily written, as if Clara had changed her mind at the last moment. "I don't know if I can go through with this, Martha. I told him the baby wasn't his. Maybe that was a mistake. I was angry, hurt, but I had to protect Emily. She can never be part of his world." Martha's eyes widened. Told him the baby wasn't his? Her heart thudded. That meant... If Clara had lied, if she'd told Robert the child wasn't his, even if it might have been, then the truth was still buried under decades of fear and pain. Martha collapsed into the chair, clutching the letter to her chest. Her tears fell hot and heavy. For years she had believed she was honoring her friend's dying wish, keeping the secret safe, but maybe Clara had wanted to confess, to make things right, and never got the chance. And now, because of Martha's silence, that secret had become a weapon, one that had torn apart everyone she loved. The fire crackled softly, casting her shadow against the wall. Outside, snow kept falling, endless, quiet, merciless. Martha looked toward the window, whispering into the night, "Clara, if there's still a truth to save, I'll find it. I swear I will." The clock struck midnight. The house trembled slightly with the wind, and in that sound Martha felt something shift, the weight of guilt turning into resolve. Tomorrow, she would uncover everything, even if it meant losing what little she had left. The next morning, sunlight struggled through the heavy gray clouds, casting a dim glow over the snow-laden fields. Martha hadn't slept. She sat at her kitchen table, Wrapped in a wool blanket, Clara's letter spread out before her. Her eyes were swollen, her mind raw, but one thought pulsed louder than her heartbeat. What if Clara lied? Not to hurt, but to protect. She needed proof. Martha opened the old cedar chest in her bedroom, the one that had held decades of memories. Inside were boxes of photographs, postcards, and letters tied with ribbons. Her hands moved carefully, as though afraid the past might crumble if she touched it too fast. In one small envelope marked Summer 1981, she found a stack of photos. Robert standing beside his younger brother, William, at the county fair. William, charming, reckless, with a grin that made women blush. He'd always been trouble. He'd left town suddenly that same year, claiming a job offer out west, and never returned. But as Martha looked at the picture, something inside her stirred. She remembered Clara that summer, radiant, secretive, sneaking away in the afternoons. Back then, Martha thought she'd been meeting Robert. But what if... Her heart pounded. She searched deeper, finding another letter. One written in Clara's unmistakable cursive, addressed not to her, but to W. I can't keep this up. She suspects something. You said you'd tell him, but you haven't. If I disappear, promise me you'll stay away from her. She's too kind to bear this. Martha's hands shook. She read it again, the words clearer each time. You said you'd tell him. Tell who? Robert? That would only make sense if William had been the one involved with Clara, not Robert. She pressed the letter to her lips, trembling. Oh, Clara, what did you do? Her thoughts raced. The necklace, the tears, the disappearance. If William had been the man Clara loved, and she had told Robert the baby wasn't his, then everything had spiraled from that lie. Clara had vanished, William had fled, and Robert, loyal, unsuspecting Robert, had carried the shame silently, never knowing what his brother had done. And now, all these years later, Emily and Daniel were paying the price for sins that weren't even theirs. Martha stood abruptly, a sudden surge of determination pushing through her grief. She had to tell them. She had to set it right before this lie consumed them all. She grabbed her coat, clutching the letter in her fist, and stepped outside. The cold hit her lungs, sharp and clean, but she didn't care. For the first time in days, her steps had purpose. She got into her car, the engine groaning against the frost. Hold on, Emily, she whispered. I know the truth now. I can fix this. But as she backed out of the driveway, a new fear crept into her mind. What if Emily and Daniel had already made a choice they couldn't undo? Her heart sank. The truth was coming, yes, but she was terrified it might already be too late. When Martha pulled up to Daniel and Emily's house, the snow had turned to slush, gray and heavy on the driveway. Daniel's car sat crooked in front, half buried under the wet flakes. She hurried up the steps, knocking hard on the door. No answer. She knocked again. After a long pause, the door opened, just a crack. Daniel stood there, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot. The living room behind him was a mess. Bottles on the table, curtains drawn. The remnants of what once looked like a home now turned hollow. Mom, he said flatly, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you, she said, her voice shaking but firm. It's important. It's about Emily and your father. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. You're a little late for that. He turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door open. Martha followed, closing it behind her. The air smelled like stale coffee and grief. She's gone, Daniel muttered, collapsing onto the couch. Packed her things and left last night. No note, no explanation, just gone. He looked up at his mother, his eyes hollow. I think she believes we're... He couldn't say the word. Martha took a deep breath. You're not, Daniel. He blinked, as if he hadn't heard her right. What? She pulled the second letter from her coat pocket, her hands trembling as she held it out. I found this. It's from Clara, to someone named William. Daniel frowned. Uncle William? Martha nodded. Yes. I thought for years that your father, that Robert was the man she loved, but I was wrong. It was his brother." Daniel stared at her in disbelief, his jaw tightening. "Mom, you can't just... How can you be sure?" "Because she wrote it." Martha opened the letter, reading the faded lines aloud, her voice breaking halfway through. She said, "You said you'd tell him, but you haven't. That means your father didn't even know. He wasn't the man, Daniel." Daniel stood up, pacing the floor. His hands ran through his hair as he tried to process it. "So, you're saying Emily and I aren't—" "No," Martha whispered. "You're not related, not by blood, not in any way." For a moment, there was only silence. Then Daniel let out a shaky breath, his body sagging with relief. He sat back down, his face buried in his hands. "My God, all this time, we thought—" "I know," she said softly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought I was protecting you by keeping quiet, but all I did was let the lies fester." Daniel looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "Does Emily know?" Martha shook her head. "Not yet, but she has to, before she disappears for good." He nodded slowly, determination flickering in his tired eyes. "Then we'll find her." Martha placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "We'll find her together." Outside, the wind began to rise again, howling against the house like a warning. But for the first time in days, there was a spark of warmth in the air, fragile, uncertain, but real. They had a truth now. And with it, maybe a chance to heal. Daniel and Martha drove in silence. The snow had thinned, but the roads were slick and gray, stretching endlessly ahead. Every few minutes, Daniel glanced at his phone, hoping for a message from Emily that never came. The silence between mother and son was thick. Not angry anymore, but fragile, like a truce made of glass. "She could have gone to her mother's old place," Daniel murmured. "The cabin near Ridge Hill. She mentioned it once." Martha nodded. "Then that's where we'll start." They drove past the town's edge, the landscape turning wild and pale. Martha watched the trees blur by, her thoughts tangled in the years she'd spent in silence. She'd spent half her life protecting the wrong truth. And Robert? What had he known all along? As they passed the old church, Daniel slowed the car. "Mom," he said quietly, "when Dad died, you handled all the papers, right?" "Yes." "Did you ever read his will? All of it?" Martha frowned. "Of course I did. Why?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. "Because I did too. Last night." Martha blinked. "Daniel, why—" "I was angry," he admitted. "I wanted answers. I was looking for something, anything that could explain the kind of man he was. But I found this." He unfolded the paper and handed it to her. "Read the last page." Her eyes scanned the familiar lines until they reached a paragraph she'd somehow overlooked years ago, one written in Robert's own hand. "To my wife, Martha, and to my son, Daniel, if you ever learn of my mistakes, know that I carry them with me. I was not the man I should have been. I kept a promise for someone who could not keep her own. I pray one day you'll understand that silence can be love too." Martha's breath caught. Her hand covered her mouth as tears welled up. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew everything." Daniel's voice cracked. "He stayed silent all those years. For you? For her?" "Both," Martha said softly. "He must have known Clara was carrying William's child. He knew the truth but protected everyone, even her memory." Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes. "All this time he let us think he was the villain." Martha's tears spilled freely, and I became one instead. The car rolled to a stop in front of an old wooden cabin half buried in snow. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney. Daniel turned off the engine. "She's here." Martha stared at the soft trail of footprints leading to the door. Her pulse quickened. The moment she dreaded and prayed for had finally arrived. She placed a trembling hand on Daniel's arm. Before we go in, whatever happens, we tell her everything. No more secrets. No more lies." He nodded, his voice low but steady. "No more." Together they stepped out of the car and walked toward the cabin, two silhouettes against the pale, endless white, carrying the weight of generations of silence toward one final reckoning. Snow whispered against the cabin windows as Martha and Daniel stepped inside. The warmth from the small fireplace brushed their faces, but the air was thick with tension. Emily sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, a mug of untouched tea before her. Her eyes were swollen, her hair loose, her face pale but defiant. When she saw them, her body stiffened. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel took a careful step forward. "Em, please, we just need to talk." She shook her head. "I don't want to hear another lie." Martha's voice trembled. "Then let me tell you the truth." Emily looked up sharply, her expression weary, wounded. The truth is that my mother was destroyed by a man who used her. That necklace was his gift, his mark of betrayal, and you—" She pointed at Martha, her hand shaking. "You brought it back to me as if it was some precious memory." Martha swallowed hard. "Because I thought it was, until now." She took a slow breath, pulled the letter from her coat, and placed it on the table between them. "Your mother wasn't destroyed by Robert, Emily. She was loved by his brother, William." Emily froze. Her eyes darted to the paper, then back to Martha. "What are you talking about?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice quiet, gentle. "We found Clara's letters, Em. She was in love with my uncle, not my father." Emily blinked, confusion flickering across her face. No, she told me—" "She lied," Martha said softly. "She told him the baby wasn't his because she wanted to protect you. William was wild, unstable. Your mother feared what would happen if he stayed in your lives, so she left, and she made Robert promise to keep the truth hidden." Emily's lips parted, her voice small. Then, "My father. He wasn't—" "Robert never touched your mother," Martha said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "He kept her secret all his life, and I kept mine. Too long." Silence filled the cabin, heavy and raw. Emily's breathing grew uneven. She looked from Martha to Daniel. Realization dawning slowly, painfully. "So Daniel and we're not—" "No," Daniel whispered. "You're not." Her eyes fluttered shut, and for a long moment no one spoke. Then she covered her face and began to sob, deep, broken sobs that shook her shoulders. Daniel knelt beside her, his own eyes wet. He reached for her hand, hesitant at first, then firm. "It's over, Em. The past can't hurt us anymore." Martha stood there, silent, watching the two of them. Her heart ached, but for the first time it wasn't from guilt. It was release. Emily lifted her head, her eyes glistening through tears. "Why did you do it, Martha? Why keep this for so long?" Martha smiled faintly through the trembling of her lips. "Because I thought protecting the past would protect the people I loved. I was wrong." Sometimes love means letting the truth hurt, just long enough to heal. The wind outside softened. The flames flickered lower, golden against their faces. For the first time in decades, the truth sat among them. Painful, but clean. And for the first time in years, Christmas felt like it might begin again. 3 days passed. The snow had begun to melt, dripping from rooftops like time easing its grip. Martha's house sat in silence, the laughter and chaos of Christmas now nothing more than ghosts in the corners. The tree still stood in the living room, its lights dimmed, the ornaments reflecting only her shadow. She moved slowly through the house, collecting plates and decorations that no one would use again this season. The quiet should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It was heavy. Like the air itself carried the weight of all the things that had been said and all the years that couldn't be undone. Everywhere she looked, she saw traces of the people she'd hurt. Daniel's old Christmas stocking, still hanging by the fireplace, a half-empty bottle of Emily's favorite wine, a gold ribbon from the gift that had torn their world apart. Martha sat down by the fire, holding the ribbon in her hands. Her fingers traced the soft edges as tears welled up again. She had told the truth. She had done what was right. But the truth, she realized, didn't erase pain. It simply uncovered it. In the days since the cabin, Daniel had visited once. He'd hugged her. A long, silent embrace that said everything words couldn't. But behind that warmth, she had felt something new in him. Distance. He needed time, and she would give it. Emily hadn't come. Martha didn't expect her to. She imagined the young woman somewhere far from town, trying to piece her heart back together, trying to remember how to breathe without the weight of the past pressing down on her. Martha leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to the window. The snow outside shimmered in the pale afternoon light. "Clara," she whispered, voice hoarse, "I kept your secret for too long." Her voice cracked. "I thought I was saving them, but all I did was steal their peace." The fire snapped, scattering sparks that danced before dying. She thought of Robert, the husband who had carried his own silence to the grave. How many nights had he sat where she sat now, alone with guilt and love knotted together so tightly he couldn't tell them apart? Martha closed her eyes. "You were right," she murmured to him in the stillness. "Silence can be love, but love shouldn't be silence." The door creaked. For a moment she thought it was her imagination, the house settling again into emptiness. But then she heard footsteps. "Mom?" Daniel's voice. She turned, her heart leaping. He stood at the doorway holding a small grocery bag and a faint, tired smile. "I brought you some soup. You probably haven't eaten, have you?" A soft laugh escaped her lips, fragile but real. "You know me too well." He set the bag down, kneeling beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel took her hand. "Emily's staying with her aunt. She needs time. But she'll come around." Martha nodded, blinking back tears. "I don't blame her." "I know," Daniel said quietly, "but I think she finally understands. About all of it. About you." She looked at him, her son, the one she'd nearly lost to a truth she didn't tell soon enough, and whispered, "Do you?" Daniel squeezed her hand, his eyes glistening. "Yeah, Mom, I do." And for the first time in a long while, Martha let herself cry. Not from guilt, but from the fragile relief of still being loved, even after everything. That night the house was silent again. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness so complete it almost hurt. Martha sat at her writing desk by the window, a single lamp casting a circle of amber light around her. The snow outside glittered under the moon, and for the first time in years, the world felt both endless and empty. She took out a sheet of stationery, the kind she hadn't used since Robert died, and began to write. The pen trembled in her hand. "My dear Emily, if this letter ever finds you, I hope the world has been kind to you since that night. I know you have every reason to hate me, and perhaps, for a time, you will. I can't change that. But I need you to know that what I did, and what I kept, came from love, though it was the wrong kind of love, the kind that hides instead of heals." Her eyes blurred. She wiped the tears with the back of her hand, forcing herself to continue. "Your mother was my best friend. She was brave, foolish, and full of light. When she handed me that necklace, she asked me to protect you. I thought that meant protecting you from pain, but now I see what she really needed was for someone to help you face it." The clock ticked softly. Each second seemed louder than the last. "I know that the truth broke you and Daniel. But I also believe it set you free. You two were never bound by sin, only by fear. And fear, once faced, can be forgiven." Her pen faltered as her heart clenched. She could almost see Emily's face, angry, tear-streaked, but alive, strong, the way Clara's had been, once. "If you ever decide to come back, I won't ask for forgiveness. I'll just be grateful to see you walk through my door again." She signed it simply, "With love, always, Martha." She folded the letter carefully, placed it inside an envelope, and sealed it with trembling fingers. Then she placed it on the mantel beside the photo of Robert and Daniel, a family frozen in a moment before all the secrets began. The fire had burned low, only embers glowing now. Martha stood, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders, and walked to the window. Outside, the world looked almost peaceful, soft, white, quiet. She whispered, "I did what I could, Clara. Maybe not well, but I tried." A small smile touched her lips through the tears. She felt old, fragile, but lighter somehow. As if, by writing that letter, she had laid a burden down she'd been carrying for decades. From the distance came the faint sound of church bells, marking midnight, the start of a new year. Martha closed her eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in a long time, she didn't pray for the past to change. She simply hoped the future would find a way to forgive her. The candle flickered once, then went out. And in the dark, Martha whispered softly into the silence, "Good night, Emily. Come home when you're ready." Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted in hesitant patches, revealing the damp, stubborn grass beneath. Martha's house stood quiet as ever, but something had changed. The air inside felt softer, lighter. She had taken down the Christmas decorations at last, replacing the wilted wreath with a small vase of daffodils she'd picked from the garden. She was sitting on the porch one morning, a knitted shawl over her shoulders, when she saw a car pull into the driveway. Her heart jumped. Daniel's car. He got out first, waving to her with a cautious smile. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, sweetheart," she said, rising to her feet. "You look tired." He chuckled softly. "Been driving all night." Then he turned toward the passenger side, where the door opened slowly, and Emily stepped out. For a moment, Martha forgot how to breathe. Emily looked different, smaller somehow, not in stature, but in spirit. Her face was pale, her hair tied loosely back, and yet there was a gentleness in her eyes Martha hadn't seen before. Neither of them spoke as Emily walked toward the porch. The crunch of gravel under her shoes was the only sound. When she finally stopped in front of Martha, her lips trembled. "I read your letter," Emily said softly. Martha swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Emily admitted. "But Daniel, he said I should, that it wasn't just a letter, it was a confession." Martha's voice broke into a whisper. "It was more than that. It was an apology." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small box, red velvet worn at the corners. She held it out. "I brought something for you." Martha hesitated, her hands trembling as she took it. When she opened the lid, a soft gasp escaped her lips. Inside was the same gold necklace, the teardrop pendant, but it had been repaired, polished, and newly engraved. On the back, in delicate cursive, were the words, "To the woman who kept love alive." Tears blurred Martha's vision. "Oh, Emily." Emily's voice quivered. "I hated that necklace my whole life. I thought it was a curse, a reminder of everything that ruined my mother. But now I see it differently. It wasn't the necklace that destroyed her. It was the lies, the fear." She looked straight into Martha's eyes. "You didn't destroy anything. You just didn't know how to stop the pain. Neither did she. Neither did I." Martha's tears spilled freely. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was honoring her wish." "I know," Emily said quietly, "and maybe you did. Just not in the way you meant to." The two women stood there, the spring wind stirring the air between them. Then slowly, Emily stepped forward. Martha opened her arms and they embraced. Not perfectly, not tightly, but with the hesitant warmth of people learning to forgive. Daniel watched from the steps, his eyes wet but his smile genuine. For the first time in months, he looked like himself again. Martha pulled back, brushing Emily's hair gently. "Thank you," she whispered. Emily shook her head. "No, Martha. Thank you for keeping her memory alive, even when it hurt." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of earth and rain. Somewhere down the street, church bells began to ring, echoing softly through the valley. Martha looked at the necklace again, the gold catching the morning light. It didn't look heavy anymore. It looked free. And for the first time in years, she felt the same. That afternoon, the house was filled with a kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. It was the soft quiet of peace, fragile, tentative, but real. Martha had made tea, the kind Emily liked, with cinnamon and honey. The three of them sat in the living room, sunlight spilling through the curtains, cutting golden shapes across the floorboards. For the first time in months, laughter returned. Small at first, but genuine. Daniel told stories about the boys, how they'd been asking when Grandma was coming back. Emily smiled faintly at that, tracing her finger along the rim of her teacup. "They miss you," Daniel said softly. Martha's eyes glistened. "I miss them too." "Then maybe," Emily said, glancing up shyly, "we could bring them next weekend. For dinner?" Martha's heart fluttered. "I'd love that, sweetheart, more than anything." Silence settled again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was the kind that lingers between people who've been through too much to fill every space with words. After a while, Emily stood and wandered to the fireplace. Her gaze fell on the envelope still resting on the mantel, the letter Martha had written to her weeks ago. She picked it up, smiled faintly, then turned toward the window where a faint breeze stirred the lace curtain. "You know," she said, "I used to hate Christmas. Every year it felt like pretending. Like everyone else was celebrating something I could never feel." Martha nodded, her voice soft. "I know that feeling." Emily looked at her, eyes steady. "But this year, I think I'll try again." A slow smile spread across Martha's lips. "Then I will too." Daniel stood looking around the living room. The tree was gone, the walls bare except for one hook above the door, the one that had held the wreath every December for 40 years. He walked over to the closet, rummaged inside, and came out holding it. The old wreath, slightly frayed, still smelled faintly of pine. He looked at his mother. "I think we forgot something." Martha's breath caught as he hung the wreath back in its place. The little red bow on it sagged slightly, but somehow that made it more beautiful. Emily stepped beside Daniel, resting a hand on his arm. Martha stood a few feet away, her hand pressed to her heart. The light from the window caught the golden pendant at Emily's neck, the same one that had once brought so much pain. Now it glowed like a promise. Outside, children's laughter echoed faintly from down the street. The world had begun to thaw. Spring birds sang where winter once ruled. Martha turned toward the window, smiling through tears. "It's funny," she murmured, "how sometimes the end of a story feels like a beginning." Emily looked at her gently. "Maybe it always is." The three of them stood there in silence, watching the soft light fade over the snowy hills. Not a perfect family, but a mended one. Broken things, Martha thought, could still hold light if you placed them just right. She reached up, touching the wreath lightly. "Welcome home," she whispered. And for the first time in years, the house felt alive again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And before you go, comment 1 if you felt something tonight, if a moment, a tear, or a word stayed with you. Comment 0 if it didn't, because every heart feels differently, and that's what makes these stories real.